Hello.
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 Let's wait for one more minute. Hmm. Hello, everyone. Let's start the call. Hmm. So, we start with the client updates. Anyone want to share? I think not every client attending today, but anyone wants to start. So maybe before the update, uh, just let me double confirm. So definitely one was shut down, and then so currently we don't have any active definite. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Client update. Recent anything?
So during the last 2 weeks, we work on a fix about our initial synchronization, also on a fix about our sampling. About new feature, we implemented the metadata v3 with the custody subnet count is the metadata. So basically, if the peer is able to respond with the custody subnet counts in metadata v3, we use it. Else, we fall back on the node record. We implemented this pull request, this feature, even if the pull request is not yet merged in the specification. Yes. And what we are doing now, we are working on the blob sidecars beacon API right now there is a SV1 beacon blob sidecar. Beacon API is not able to respond with PeerDAS. And also we are working on a better pipeline for data column verification. But basically, this is it for Prism.
Thank you. And then Lighthouse.
Hey, hello everyone. For Lighthouse, we have been debugging our networking issues. Previously, we had issues with our Lighthouse node disconnecting other Lighthouse nodes. So we've identified the issue and we've made a fix for it. So there's some improvement in our network stability. And then we've also been doing a bit of debugging on the Rust KZG library. And Kev has made a few fixes for us. So I think our DAS branch is getting a bit more stable now. And currently we are focused on refactoring and progressively kind of merge our DAS branch into our main branch. We've made some good progress. So we're about halfway there. I think we'll continue to focus on finishing the merge into the main branch so we can kind of pick up the speed a bit quicker after it's finished merging. Another change that we've made is we've disabled sampling by default for now because I think sampling was causing us a bit of issue and then we're trying to isolate some networking issues. So it's currently disabled by default, but we can also enable it. I think although there's also a proposal from Francesco and Alex Stokes about not shipping sampling with PeerDAS. So I think that could potentially be useful if we want to enable and disable sampling in the future DevNets. So we've got a flag added to enable or disable PeerDAS sampling. I think we're probably going to start preparing for DevNet 2 soon. I don't think we have a spec soon, but I don't think we have a spec yet. But I think we've talked about some of the things that we want to implement, like the metadata v3. So we might potentially look at that soon as well. But at the moment, we're trying to focus on getting our DAS branch merged into our main branch, and then we'll start looking at the PeerDAS DevNet 2 specification changes. That's all from Lighthouse. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other clients? Lodestar?
Hey guys, so there isn't much update on Lodestar. I'm working on getting the metadata PR implemented, and but otherwise, I think without sampling, we should be good for any DevNet that we can spin up. But I have a question with regards to the data sampling. So are we going to keep data availability? Sorry, with regard to data availability, are we going to keep data availability for the current slot, or it is going for parent slot? Because on the basis of that, there might be some refactoring or some dev work that I might need to do for the fork choice. And I think this is sort of an important point. What is the availability that we are envisioning when we go live? Because yeah, a lot of works depend upon that.
Thank you. Brentian?
Hi, Solis from Gradina team. So we had some fixes for the PeerDAS. So a few folks are working on this from the fellowship program. So essentially, I think we are moving forward. However, I hear that there are discussions to remove sampling And during this call, I would like to hear what is the status on this, and if it's going to be accepted quite soon.
Thank you. And do we have any? Oh, Teku.
Teku, yeah. Hi all. I have found and fixed several issues with our default sampler, and also we have implemented lossy sampler, but it's difficult to test it in local environment. So until DevNet launch, I'm not sure in it. Both samplers are not completely integrated in fork choice, so we just log when we sampled. We don't break fork choice if we cannot sample. We want more testing before enabling it. And also we have added all required by spec validation and gossip and the recresp. We didn't have it before. And everything is not merged yet. We both, me and Dent, are now on vacation, so I hope we are not launching DevNet 2 on this week. That's all for me.
Thank you. Do we have Nimbus Dev here today?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yes. Oh, go on.
So last week, we actually focused more on having a lesser diff in terms of our Pectra branch and the PeerDAS branch. So we started off with upstreaming the CKZG to the latest, and we fixed all issues that were basically creating a diff in the Pectra branch first, like having that extra pre-compute parameter to accelerate, I think, load trusted setup. Then last week we started implementing lossy sampling as well, but we sort of halted it till Thursday's call, like last Thursday's call, where I think we all agreed to drop sampling. So there is not much progress in that region right now. After that, we refactored Alpha 3 specs and also like all the related crypto stuff as well. And while passing the test vectors, I actually came across that there was some inconsistency between the Alpha 3 test vectors and the Alpha 3 public functions that were exposed. So I think that is fixed. I think that can get fixed in the next Alpha 4 release. We are still WIP on metadata v3 for custody subnet count. And we are still work in progress for the upcoming PRs like validator custody and the fork choice. So yeah, that is pretty much from Nimbus.
Thank you. So on the agenda, it was about definitely one, but I think Barnabas is here now, and then do we want to talk about the restart of definitely one or talk about definitely two instead? What's the code name of the next definitely exactly?
I haven't been testing any PeerDAS related branches lately on kurtosis. I would be happy to begin this again. I'm just curious about client readiness, basically.
Yep.
Can we set a date for the next DevNet if other clients are feeling ready to? And yeah, and also like fix up on the features that we want for the next DevNet.
I think
Yeah.
before we sort of set the date on next, I think, yeah, it's worth discussing what the spec is going to be. And my question that I already raised when I talked earlier was that, how is the data sampling going to look like when this goes live? Because I think would want we would want the next version of DevNet to look as closely as how it should be in the live. So if somebody has an input on data sampling point, because I think I'm very curious about it.
Could you like
Yeah,
clarify what issues with sampling do you have?
no,
Is it
so
whether the sample?
replace sampling by availability. Sorry. I meant availability. So data availability in the sense that are we going to do a data availability of the current slot itself, or are we going to do data availability of parent, or let's say of nth ancestor? So what is the data availability going to look like when we go live?
It's always for the current slot, correct? Currently with the neb, if you want to validate a block, you got to validate the blobs for it in the current slot, not in the next slot, and so on.
Yeah, that is okay. But is that what we are going live with what we will go live with for PeerDAS?
Yeah, that's for us. That would be how it works right now. So if you get a block, you have to validate its DA at its current slot.
Yeah, but in the spec, for example, it was mentioned that the DA happen of the parent slot, right? So
Is this for sampling, or because from what I understand, for verifying any block for its you want to validate its DA, it's always done, at its slot itself.
yeah, this is not regarding sampling, and I just want to sort of clarify with regard to availability. I mean, sampling is easy to do DA of nth ancestor because it does not affect the fork choice that you have. And one of that is sort of my major curiosity that that are we going to stick with the current slot, or the availability is going to change? Because if it's going to change, then the fork choice will change, and hence there is some work that I think that should be put in before we launch any other developments.
So there's a recent proposal by Alex, and I think Francesco made a post about it like just today, which is yesterday for some time zones, that like how it will look like without sampling. If we don't do sampling, then we're just doing the custody column verification, which means we're doing it for the current slot. Is that correct? If we're just doing the custody columns and no sampling.
Yeah, if we are only worried about, so when we are importing the block and the availability check is only about the current slot of whatever custody that you want, I think then yes, then there is no major change that is required in the fork choice. And sampling is basically to see whether the peer is relevant or not, and it can happen at any point or not happen at all. And obviously, if, for example, you are using availability of the current slot, then you already can say that we have sampled for the particular custody that we are interested in. So I guess that is okay. But yeah, I just want to confirm that whether availability checks are going to be on the current slot, or is there a possibility that availability of the parent or of some ancestor will be checked, because that will radically change the fork choice.
I mean, you can't import a block if you haven't verified its parent's DA, right? So I'm guessing there's no change from how we do it in DNAB
So
right now for blobs.
I think there was a version of spec where it said that the availability checks will happen for the parent. But of course, if we are doing availability checks for the current slot while importing, obviously we would have no block embedded in the fork choice which does not have availability. So the parent does not come into the question. So if it's going to stay that way, then I guess it's okay.
Yeah, it should stay that way. I think you're referring to sampling then, because that was when it was brought up.
Okay, I'll recheck because I think I'm confused. I was confused and I was thinking that even for availability that we'll import a block if its parent is available. So parent data columns are available. So if that is not the case, then yeah, my confusion is sort of resolved.
Yeah, I think you're referring to sampling in that case, because I remember that is when it was brought up.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
With regards to sampling, so I'm not an expert on this, but because someone asked whether, sampling is going to be the final form or it's not going to be the final form, I think it's still under discussion. And I think, and by sampling, I mean like sampling of not the current thing, of the, after the fact, basically. I think this is still under discussion, and looking at Francesco's newest post, I do have the feeling that if people think that it greatly reduces implementation complexity, I think it's quite like making this clear will make things easier to decide, basically, because it is mostly an implementation complexity reducing suggestion. So from this discussion, I get the feeling that it really improves implementation complexity. So if that's true, I think it is worth mentioning. And it will influence whether we end up doing sampling in the end or not.
Okay, I'm just reading from the consensus specs that has been sort of linked from the EIP, and it says a note on fork choice. Fork choice, it will be a replacement of this data available call in data with column sampling instead of full download. Note that is data available will likely do a -1 follow distance, so that you need to check the availability of slot n-1 for slot n. So it's not about sampling, it's about availability. And if there is a change of availability in the sense that in the current DevNet, we are doing the availability of the current slot or block that we are importing. But if it's going to parent, then it will sort of change the way the fork choice is implemented, and that needs to be taken care of, in the sense that why I mentioned this is that any DevNets that we spin off should be as close to the DevNets that we want to go live. So if we want to do n-1 availability, then we need to sort of dev that code in and get it out and sort of make sure that next DevNets we are doing it on n-1 sampling instead of the current n sampling availability.
So what you're referring to is trailing slot fork choice. So in the interop, we kind of decided that it is not a good idea to do this because you do not want to put sampling in the critical path for consensus, which is in fork choice. So I don't think we have to worry about checking for this
Okay,
right now.
in that case, can we sort of update the specs and sort of link the correct specs in the EIP, because it can be confusing.
Yeah, I agree. We should probably update it. There have been a lot of changes. So on another note, I've gone through Francesco's post. Among all the other clients, is a consensus that we should go with subnet DAS and leave peer sampling as something to do in the future? Would it make implementation easier for you guys?
Yeah, I think sampling is sort of what I see is that it's sort of an independent module that can be added, and once we have a working DevNet, we can sort of increase the complexity by adding the sampling so that the pairing is stronger and we can have a stable DevNet. So as of now, I think I'm good with adding sampling later on.
Yeah, I also agree as well. I think sampling. I think a few clients already have sampling implemented, but I think there are quite a lot of edge cases that we need to think about and also handle. So I think if we exclude sampling, that's going to reduce the complexity quite a lot and make it a bit easier to make progress.
So like when you guys mention on removing sampling, do you just mean for the DevNet or do you mean in general for PeerDAS as it is?
In my opinion, I think we can decide about sampling in sort of later parts of the DevNet where we think that things are stable enough.
That makes sense.
I think.
So I suppose.
Sorry. I think Francesco's comment was also like saying that like if we can tweak the network parameters of subnet DAS, then sampling doesn't really add like more security. I think that was the argument that we could potentially exclude sampling. I think there's some trade-off there. So it might be worth having a look at the post. I haven't actually finished reading it, so I can't really comment too much about it. But it seems like Francesco's pretty confident that if we don't ship sampling, just the security will be okay. So shall I?
No, I just want to wrap the conversation. So is that the rough consensus that the clients can keep working on the networking issues and the refactoring, and at the same time that Francesco, the spec fellows, will try to refine the sampling logic? Is that what our next to do in the next 1 or 2 weeks? Jimmy, give me a sum up. Any objection? No. Thank you, Albert. And then any other? So we can talk about the sampling logic in the code later. But just before that, I want to mention that we will have a spec release today or tomorrow. The release note is here. So mainly it's a regular release that I don't think it would be the definite logic, but this release will include some KDG updates, and just want to make sure that it won't influence what you are working on lately. Yep. And is there any like urgent PRs that we should include it, or it's okay? And I suppose the next release or next release we will try to focus on the PeerDAS definitely.
I think it would be helpful. I think it would be helpful if metadata v3 is like reviewed and merged.
You mean the full diff between the release? Give me 1 second. Oh, metaverse. Okay, this one. Okay. I will include it after this call. Thank you. And any other updates? Any other request? Please let me know in like
I
2
guess there
hours.
is Francesco's fork choice PR, which is not yet merged and should not get immediately merged, but it's likely going to get in the next release, and it does change a few things. But it's not for this release. But it seems like the next spec release is also going to be important because it's going to include the sampling stuff and the fork choice stuff.
Yep, agree.
I have a query. If we are planning to drop sampling in the consecutive devnets, then in the next release, why would we have sampling merged?
I don't think it has been fully decided whether we're going to drop sampling in the next devnets. Has it been decided? I'm sorry, if it has, I have missed it.
Okay. Okay, I get it. Thanks.
But I do actually think that we should very soon decide whether the next devnet should have sampling or not. I think that is something we should do very soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think we already decided that next DevNet will not have sampling. In fact, next few DevNets will not have sampling. But later on, when we have stable DevNets, then we can decide to add on sampling. But that was sort of my import of the discussion, that at least for the next few DevNets, we will not have sampling.
Okay, thanks. I had missed that.
So I think clients, who have already implemented sampling can continue doing so, but it shouldn't be a requirement for any other client who's having issues to actually have sampling working.
So they can, with the only difference that they should not disconnect a peer if sampling fails, I guess, because
Yeah,
that
so
is
like for us, what we do is that we try to sample something, and if we can't sample it, we just log it out. It doesn't really do anything, but it does test, that our incremental DAS paths, they actually work and stuff like that.
Just a question regarding the next DevNet launch. Is it worth creating a like HackMD page for the DevNet 2 spec? And I know we want to have metadata v3 implemented. I don't think we want to include any further changes, but I think it would be good to include things like making sure that every client serves the by route and by range request before we launch DevNet.
Oh, Barnabas dropped one immediately. Yes. So I think Alpha 4 will include the metadata and some KUG updates.
I think we should aim for Alpha 4 then.
Can the client please 8? If that's okay.
I think if we are targeting Alpha 4, I guess we at least need some more time. for the DevNet. Like if we agree that the DevNet 2 is, or the next DevNet is compliant with Alpha 4. Yeah, okay, yeah. Then that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure when Alpha 4 could be merged in theory, but I don't expect it to be happening right away.
I plan to merge it in 24 hours. But of course, without fork choice. So just current address and then the metadata APIs. Okay. Okay. Do you have any other open discussion?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any progress with the custody group chain proposed by Pop. I think it's called decouple the networking subnet with DAS core. I think that's going to be a bit of code change, so I kind of want to know if that's something we're going to go ahead or not. But he's not on the call, so but you are. Sorry.
Pop, if you are talking, we can't hear you. Still no. So Pop the message in the chat that we want
Can you hear
to
me?
get more reviews. Yes.
Yeah. I think I want to go ahead, but yeah, but I think like I think I want more people to look at it first. I think there are not many people to look at it currently, but I think I want to go ahead. Sound good? Okay, a moment.
It feels like most people that comment on the PR generally agree to it, but there's just not been like formal approval for actions yet.
Yeah, the PR looks good to me. Just it'll take us some time to get the changes done. But if no client is against this, I think maybe we can target this for Alpha 5.
I think we got good support today, and so Alpha 5 we can target on the decouple PR and also the book choice and how to deal with sampling. That's the three main goals for the next release. Okay, and then any other open discussion?
Francesco is gonna join the call in 5 minutes, he says, and he also told me that the data availability checks should happen on the current block, not the parent. So if the spec is ambiguous in this regard, we should probably make it more clear. That said, I mainly joined the call to ask if anyone has questions or about the KZG libraries or if people have. I heard that the Lighthouse has been using Kev's Rust library, which is nice. If people have questions or transition questions or anything.
Yeah, no question from us at this stage. I've run into a few issues, but Kev's fixed it pretty quickly, and I think it's looking pretty stable for us now. Thanks.
Nice.
Any other open discussion? While we're waiting for Francesco. Mhm. Mhm.
I guess we don't need to wait for Francesco, and we can sort of resolve this on Discord or something.
Right.
Only 2 more minutes though. Yeah, yeah, I don't have any questions. Looking at Francesco's post. Do we want to talk about the complexity about sampling? Does any client have any issues regarding having sampling implemented robustly?
I guess the
Yeah.
opposite would also be interesting, like having sampling implemented in not modular way, such that disabling it is complicated if we end up with disabling it.
Any other open discussion? It was a long 5 minutes. Should we move this conversation to Discord? Oh, okay. I have one open discussion. So on the agenda, I think someone mentioned that Francis I wonder if we should make this bi-weekly call to weekly. That's the preference from you guys. Should we make it to a weekly so that we could probably isolate the process? Any feedback, suggestions?
What's the benefit of doing this weekly for Francis?
I think mainly just more frequent updates, frequent Q&A, frequent, problem solve, I guess.
I think Francis's issue is that he's based out of Western US, so he can't attend these calls at all. Even if we do this weekly at this time, he would still face the same issues.
Right, so so it's two questions. One is to make it more frequent, and the second question is to change the move it to a more US friendly time.
From experience, moving it to a US friendly time would make it like terrible for people in APAC, because it would be easily, I think, 10 to 12 at night.
Indeed. Give this man a little drum voice. Francesco, hi.
Hello.
All right. Would you like to talk about your new document?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess George said there were some first choice questions, so which didn't seem super related to the document. So if people want to start with that, you can talk about that. Otherwise, okay, then yeah. Yeah, basically, I mean, the document is just sort of a bit expanding on what Alex mentioned at last ACDC or whatever it was, basically saying, that there at least is an avenue to like further simplify PeerDAS to where we really just for the moment not worry about implementing peer sampling and just leave that as something to then do later. And this can mean just that it can end up just being like a implementation and testing cycle kind of thing where, maybe in like a few months, then we are in a place where we can put peer sampling on something that already exists and is working well, or it can mean that in a first version, in a first rollout, really there is no peer sampling, and then is just added later at some later point. And yeah, I mean, there's not that much more to that, I guess. More, I mean, the document is just basically just trying to convince people why this is not a crazy idea and why it's actually kind of secure and yeah, like is sort of okay to do. And I guess, yeah, some little point that I try to make both there and on Discord is that this is not some last minute thing. I mean, at least some of us had been thinking about this from, even at the end of last year, that as a potential option, even though it's not what kind of was pursued for the beginning, because it seemed like, maybe we can make the let's say a fuller version of PeerDAS work, and maybe that's still the case. But yeah, this is like something that already kind of, I mean, the whole subnet DAS concept was basically this essentially, like essentially like an intermediate stepping stone where the sampling part is really just what is done through distribution, like what basically custody, like just getting columns through subnets rather than having this separate like peer sampling mechanism. So it's really just about avoiding the complexities of peer sampling, which is I mean, all of the things around timing and figuring out when do you time out, when do you send parallel queries, do you send parallel queries, how many do you send, just all of these, DOS protection, like just all these things that really are tricky about sampling strategies. And I feel like there's probably room for that to be a bit more of a research question, or at least like something in between like research and implementation as opposed to something that's just immediately shipping. So that's basically it. I guess I would love to hear from people if you actually think that this is helpful to you, like if you think this actually is a meaningful simplification, or if you don't think that it actually makes much of a difference, and like getting sampling to work just doesn't seem to be like much of an impediment at this point.
Yeah, I think not having sampling would simplify it for, I think, pretty much all clients. But I'm worried about if we go into the fork with just, essentially subnet DAS, adding in peer sampling later, after subnet DAS is live, will actually be a lot more harder. Rather than, we're thinking that we can just tack it on, but from what I see, you can't tack it on without a hard fork.
I'm curious, why do you think that? Because it kind of seems to me that as long as you have, all clients at some point being able to respond to sampling queries, then actually enabling the sending of sampling queries can basically be rolled out in whatever way. Like even, anyone can individually start doing that without too much of a problem. But yeah, I'm curious what's your perspective there?
Yeah, so like if we start with subnet DAS, you would have a certain amount of custody requirement, right? And if you want to gradually introduce peer sampling, you would drop that custody requirement, but your peers around you, they do not know that you have actually dropped it, right? There's no way to indicate that, because this is like set in the config parameter that every peer would custody these amount of subnets, and therefore you would have all these columns, right? And you would participate in gossip for these subnets. But if you let's say drop the custody requirement and then you sample for these other columns, the peers around you do not know that you've actually started doing that.
Well, like what we could do, for example, is just to introduce peer sampling at first, but still keep the, just as a, basically where it doesn't actually do anything, it's just something you do, kind of as it is now in clients, as I understand. And then at some point you drop the custody requirement, and yeah, I guess, right, that might need a coordination point, I guess. But is that too much of a problem?
I mean, if it needs a coordination point, it
Right.
would need a fork of some sort, right? So,
right, that's fair. I mean, that also, I guess, right, that's a bit of a complication, but also doesn't seem the end of the world to me, just because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, I think the way I think about it, at least most of the reason then to introduce peer sampling is just to possibly get a bit more scale. So it seems like the kind of thing that can just wait for a time where we can have such a coordination point. Like it's not something, I mean, at least the way I see it, it's not something where that we need to like how can I say it's there's no like emergency where like this need to be added for the system to be complete and work. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't we wouldn't ship a thing that doesn't work by itself. So at least the way I see it, it would be okay then to wait for another fork or coordination point or whatever. But yeah, happy to hear other opinions.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess from implementation point of view, it makes our job a lot easier, but it is kind of like kick the can down the road, right? We got to think about the next fork if we were to to add peer sampling or not, or would we just be okay with the end state being like subnet DAS?
I think the end state, no, but it's like it can stay like that for I think a while. Like I don't think there's any problem with having to wait for another fork to then add peer sampling. Like I think basically I guess Ansgar has been like trying to beam into reality this thing of a 3x blob count increase every year. I don't know, that might be ambitious, but like I think that this kind of thing would be in line with that. Like you can probably get a 2-3x whatever increase just by doing this initial version, and then adding peer sampling later is just a way to get like another extra kind of throughput increase, basically.
Like, do we have like numbers on like how much throughput increase that would be? Like, let's say if we drop the custody count, by how much we're planning to increase right now with peer sampling?
So like, for example, if we right now set the custody requirement, let's say to, I don't know, let's say 12, just to split the middle between 8 and 16, which are sort of, I guess, two of the reasonable numbers that people might want, then more or less you download, I mean, it's basically about like, it's like about a 5x kind of efficiency increase compared to 4844. And yeah, so that's basically the room you have to increase throughput. Then we might not want to increase it by 5x, but we do have in principle like up to that much room. So I think it's not it's not like a huge constraint. Like I don't think there's any world in which we 10x throughput or like 20x throughput in a year or something like that. I think like we all want to be cautious, regardless of what these measures are like in theory. So it feels to me that if we have a 5x ability to in principle increase it by 5x, maybe we can increase it by 2 or 3x, and then still have room to kind of move forward in a later fork. And then I mean, yeah, we increase adding peer sampling, then it gives even a little bit more room. I mean, I can tell you exact numbers, but it's I guess I don't know how much it's super important, but
No, that's fair enough. Makes sense.
Any other question, discussion on the sampling?
yeah, sorry, just one last thing about this. I guess I think maybe one other way to look at it really is to just say, like, we don't know at this point, what will be. I mean, we don't know what the timelines look like. We don't know what we might be able to have done in however many months, unspecified number of months until the fork. So one option is that we just start with this, like just take it as a first step of implementation and testing, and really just try to get that done, and then only then focus on peer sampling. And I mean, it's possible that we end up feeling like, oh, it's really doesn't take too much more work to do peer sampling, and we can possibly like delay the rollout and just do the whole thing, or that we see that actually peer sampling really does need more work. Why not just go with the initial thing, which already gives us a throughput increase? Like that's kind of my thinking, as at least that like it feels a lot less risky. Like it feels like that, at least by proceeding in this order, like first trying to really get distribution and reconstruction done, like basically doing the subnet task part of the whole thing, and then focusing on sampling, then it's much more likely that something will, like they will be able to ship something and get some throughput increase. And yeah, and possibly we can get the whole thing done, but just we don't have to have that uncertainty essentially.
Thank you, Francesco. Any other open discussion? So back to the call meeting time. Does anyone feel strong that we should change the time frequency, the period or the time? If not, then the next week will be in 2 weeks on the 20th at the same time. Okay. Okay. Any other closing notes before we say bye-bye to each other? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you for attending. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Talk
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.